Randy Russell.
Hello, Council. Thanks for hearing me speak. My name is Randy Russell. I am the owner of Pneumatic Eats Food Truck, owner and operator. I'd just like to start off by saying I'm not interested in operating downtown, so I'm speaking to you on behalf of, I have a location outside of city limits. I plan on staying there, so I know a lot of the brick and mortars here representing, and the main issue is about downtown. I'm not a food truck wanting to be downtown, to move downtown, but saying that, I do want to see a food truck community grow in Pensacola. I think it would add a very progressive food scene to Pensacola. It brings a lot. A lot of the brick and mortars here, they're representing, we just heard a petition. We've heard the Mitchells speak against food trucks, and I also wanted to bring a point. They mentioned, one of the Mitchells mentioned that this would lead to other trucks, tattoos and boutiques and things like that. I don't think this ordinance is very pertinent to mobile food dispensing vehicles. I don't see how that would be in particular, and I don't see any threat to any other businesses where that would come about from this ordinance. So I think that was kind of reaching in their eyes. I can also say I've had a couple of these businesses that these people who are starting the petition, who came to trying to get them to sign this petition, and most of them have just stayed neutral on it. You've noticed there's the amount of food trucks that are here, or brick and mortars that are here speaking against it. Most businesses downtown, I know most of the owners and management, I've spoken to them, they're neutral on the issue. They don't see this as a threat. I don't think the brick and mortars really understand that food trucks aren't that big of a threat. I've been operating for 3.5 months now. I consider myself successful. I'm still in business. I've become very well known. I've got a really regular following. I've managed brick and mortars that these people have owned, not these people in particular, but in Pensacola for 20 years. I know the sales they do. I usually don't talk about finances, but in this case, I'll just like to let you guys know, on a very good day for me, I do $300 to $400 in sales, in total sales. That's not net. That's my total sales on a good day. And that's me being busy and working hard. That is a drop in the bucket for a brick and mortar. I have rent, I have insurance, I pay taxes, I do everything else for a business. So my margins are right there with a brick and mortar, and if you do the math on that, this is a hard business, and I don't really see us being that much of a threat to the brick and mortars. And I just want to support this food truck ordinance as it stands, as it was written and discussed in the last council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob Witt.
Good evening, Council, Mr. President. My name is Rob Witt. I have been investing my time and efforts into building out a food truck of my own. I have a full-time job, a family business, and I plan on operating a food truck as of now 2 nights a week, predominantly Fridays and Saturdays. The downtown area is my ideal area to operate. The one thing that's a little confusing for me at the moment is so many restaurants along the Palafox corridor have been represented here tonight, and yet the Palafox corridor is off limits to food trucks. So at the same time that I understand their willingness to protect their investment, I don't understand in a situation, for example, like Beef O'Brady's, the closest possible spot to that location was much larger in distance than the original 200-foot buffer that was removed. So I understand one's desire to protect their investment. It's quite another thing to go out of your way to actually stop someone from investing in themselves. That's kind of where I have my line drawn. I want an opportunity to operate. I do think there's a happy medium, but I'm not seeing one side of the equation really trying to reach for it. You can say that you don't mind competition, but if what you are seeking prohibits the ability to actually compete, it's a one-sided argument. I have all the faith in the world in you all. I know that you guys can come together on this and find that happy medium. That's all I am asking from all of you. So thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Michael Carro.
For the patient food truck vendors, and God, look at Pepper. He's been waiting forever, right?
Thank you, Mr. Carro.
These guys need
Mr. Carro, use your time. Thank
an
you.
ordinance passed tonight, but that ordinance should include a buffer
Mr.
that is
Carro,
supported
thank
by a
you.
majority of downtown business owners
Mr.
and
Carro,
property
thank
owners.
you. Your 3
not
minutes
just
has
restaurant.
been spent. Thank
Johnson,
you.
hold on. Councilman Spencer and other people
Order,
invested
please,
in
Mr.
downtown
Carro.
long before there was a chance of realizing a profit. All of you represent districts outside of the downtown. Councilman Spencer understands his constituents and the downtown's needs. You guys should respect that and not just be going rogue. Okay? That's all I have to say. I like this force.
Pepper Dowdy.
Hello, and thank y'all for hearing me again. I'd like to address, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
I'd like to address a couple of things that were said. I empathize with our community's brick and mortar business owners. I think that's a huge, courageous move to be an entrepreneur. And I think Pensacola is a great town for that. Mr. Carro was mentioning a hypothetical about real estate, saying, what if we have a piece of real estate right next to Hopjack's that is offering the ability to operate rent-free, property tax-free, and how would that be fair? Food trucks in Pensacola is a new business model. It is something that doesn't exist here. It does exist in many cities very successfully. If you go to those cities, you will find, for the most part, that it's something that is feared at first, and then after it operates, it becomes very well received by everyone. But it is a new business model. I think that it needs encouragement. It needs support to create new growth, new progressive development. But it is not a piece of real estate. A food truck is not real estate. We don't offer seating. We don't offer an environment, a roof over the head with service and tables and air conditioning and all the many things that go along with a sit-down dining experience. So I would just like to remind the council that I think we've spent 3 years on this. We've made a lot of great progress. I don't want to see any of that progress get derailed this evening. I would be in support of continuing this conversation as a community going forward, but I think that we've reached an agreement that is a good start, and I really do think that if we go ahead and just proceed with this tonight, that the results will be very amenable to everyone involved in the community, including the brick and mortar restaurants. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Councilman Spencer.
I have a question for Pepper, and I know Ms. Pepper. Pepper, did you support this ordinance when it had the buffer in it? That was recently removed? What are your feelings if the buffer
As
gets...
far as my feelings on a buffer have been from the start.
The one that came out of the workshop after the several years?
Planning board.
Planning board.
The planning board workshop, my process through the past 3 years with this, including the time through the planning board to now, it's been a process of learning and continued research and feedback with the community. I don't recall ever supporting a buffer, but I do know that from then until now, I have definitely reached the conclusion that there is a lot of harm and litigation, I think, when you start instituting protections for other businesses from food trucks. So I do not support a buffer at this time.
That's what I wanted to know.
If that answers your question or not.
Okay.
Mr. Dowd, I got one more question for you here. Councilman Johnson?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming down, and thanks all the speakers for coming down too. I appreciate it for the input. I know you are associated with the Food Truck Coalition, I believe, and I'm trying to make a very informed decision here as we move forward. But how many food trucks? Can I ask a hypothetical question? I mean, it almost appears, it's being presented that there would be all this mass food trucks coming to downtown Pensacola, which I don't believe. But how many, just say if this happened tonight, do you have any idea of how many food trucks are even in our county, in our area? What would you think would happen? I mean, do you have any idea? Would there be 5, 3, 10, 3,000? I mean, the market wouldn't support that. I'm being kind of exaggerating there.
Now, in my dealings with the community as part of the coalition, I'm aware of somewhere between 10 to a dozen as far as actual viable food truck businesses that are either already operating, who have interest in downtown, or people who are waiting in the wings that would be interested in being new food entrepreneurs in the community. I do not believe that there is, I do think there's a little bit of a situation of a fear-mongered solution in search of a problem that doesn't exist when it comes to the sheer number of food trucks that could, come into town to operate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Chase Gilroy.
Thank you, Councilman, for hearing my words. Here is a representative of a brick and mortar restaurant operating in the historic downtown area. We've been around. I've been in the food service industry for 12 years, 6 of which being here. We're fully supporting the Food Truck Coalition and the ordinance as proposed by Charles Dowdy, as well as the support to Randy Russell, operator of nomadic food trucks. Trucks like Randy's are a great way for our community to expand the inevitable progression of the food and beverage industry in Pensacola. Food trucks are an excellent way for upcoming or experienced chefs alike to showcase their skills and provide the community with a more accessible option. We can come to you, so you don't have to go out as far. This is not only a way to provide new jobs, but to help out our community to grow, but it's also a way to show support, to support Pensacola as it has supported the chefs working in these trucks. Pensacola has always supported local businesses over corporations, and to deny this ordinance would be regressive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions, Ms. Cannada-Wynn? Okay. Councilman Johnson?
Yeah, thank you very much, and I appreciate, again, all the speakers coming down tonight. I do, and I love the Mitchells, the Seville Quarter. I've enjoyed that place since I was, 21. I'll just say 21 for right. But I do appreciate them coming down tonight, and I appreciate their investment in our community, the employees that they employ. It's a tough decision because I have so much respect for their family, but I believe in the American dream, and I believe in capitalism, and I believe in the free market, and I believe in free enterprise. Ronald Reagan said, government is not the solution to our problem, government is the problem. I believe government should get out of the way on this, and I think that if we pass this tonight, I believe that there's any unintended consequences, that we'll have an opportunity to address them later. I don't see this mass influx of food trucks coming to Pensacola. I have talked to people myself, and people want options, and they want food trucks. There's been several comments tonight that are actually inaccurate. The proposed ordinance does not allow food trucks from Garden to the Dolina Plaza. No food trucks. That area is excluded. there was a mention about there could be tattoo parlors or something else, trucks, tattoo trucks. I've never seen one of those, but they might exist. But this is specific. There's a definition of food trucks in this ordinance. I don't know if anybody's taken the time to really read it, but it defines what a food truck is. So to make a statement that we're going to have tattoo trucks or clothing shops or other things is just inaccurate. It's unfortunate because I believe that many of the arguments that are made are just not accurate, and they're inaccurate. I'll leave it at that. I believe that both can survive. I believe that food trucks and our restaurants could survive. I believe that it might even actually increase business for some of the bricks and mortars that we have. I believe in the American dream. I believe in these young people that have come before us tonight that want to participate in that dream and start a business. I believe that we should give them the opportunity. And if there becomes an unintended consequence, if something happens that we need to address later, I think this very council will address it. We have talked about this issue in one form or another. The planning board's addressed it. This thing's been going on for approximately 3 years. It's time that we move forward on this. Again, I consider many people that spoke tonight friends of mine, and I have respect for them and what they've done for our community. But I also sit here and I believe that government needs to get out of the way at some point, that it's not our responsibility to decide what businesses make it or not. We had one speaker talk about if we gave away a free restaurant spot next to another pizza place. That's not apples to apples. That was totally inaccurate. And it's unfortunate that these inaccurate statements come to us, and we have to decipher them, and it's just unfortunate. But I am going to support this tonight. I hope the Mitts will still let me go back to Seville Quarter. I think it's a great place, and I've always enjoyed it, like I said, since I was 21. But I will be supporting it tonight. Another person, Milton Freeman, said, underlying most arguments against the free market is a lack of belief in freedom itself. I believe that these folks should have an opportunity to participate and get their slice of the American dream. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Wingate. Okay. Dr. Wu?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I concur with my fellow councilman, Councilman Wingate. I believe that the food trucks have a part. I think they'll add a lot to the city. I think they'll add to the fabric. I think they'll add to the quality of life. However, I believe that we need to protect the brick and mortars as well. And even though the Mitchells have not requested a buffer, I will not support it unless we can get a buffer for any brick and mortar up 200 feet. I think that's fair. I don't think you should be able to pull a food truck right directly in the front of their door and siphon off their business. And so unless the buffer's in there, I cannot support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
I do think, I suggest that we change the language or our thought process from protecting bricks and mortar to providing a level playing field. That is what we're talking about. And the current permitting cost, the ability for a food truck that I absolutely support, but not at the current sort of rates, the permit rates and the lack of buffers, I think that we need to do some work. And, you know, as simple as it is to say, gosh, it's just a food truck. Well, the devil is in the details, and I am here to say that we have the attention of, I think, some very skilled restaurateurs. We have also the attention, the passion of food truck entrepreneurs and operators. Both of them, as sectors in the food and beverage business, I think can meet and find that happy medium. Therefore, I'm not going to support what is before us tonight and hope that we can get the details worked out.
I don't support it in its current form either. I was hoping that we could get to a form that we could support, but it sounds like we're not going to. But, I think there does need to be some more work done on it. I am in agreement with both Councilman Wu and Councilman Spencer and Councilman Wingate that there needs to be some more language added to it. And, we had a lot of that in there that got taken out last time, and that's unfortunate because I think we could have gotten something tonight that everybody was equally unhappy with. But, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Dr. Wu?
At the risk of getting shot, would it be inappropriate to move what we have move forward with the addition of the 200-foot buffer?
You can make that motion.
I make that motion.
Second.
Councilman Bear.
Thank you, Mr. President. Obviously, it's already been revealed from my email, which I did share with the press, so it can be in the paper if they want to print it, how I feel about buffers. I guess we're going to bring back the language, too, that says if you get permission of all the restaurants that are within 200 feet of the food truck, that you can actually, transact business. I'm still not going to support it, but I think there needs to be a mechanism. I mean, if you've got a McDonald's and you have a crepe truck, it's just sad to me that you're going to have to go outside 200 feet from the McDonald's when maybe you could just get permission from that business. So,
Okay. Ms. Cannada-Wynn?
Yes, again, we're doing the same thing, that we're piecemealing this again. And so I've heard council members say that, we've had this on the table for 3 years. We put out to get a feeling of a relationship between the brick and mortar businesses and the food truck, a 6-month trial period. No one bit. The vendors didn't do anything. It went by the wayside. And so all of the work in looking at how relationships would be built, what would be the pros and the cons, and what all of those issues would come up, never happened because there were no participants in the trial period. So I just think that sitting here trying to say that 3 years is too long, I'd rather have something good and that works well and that you can deal with versus just passing something or seeing it just go down the tubes altogether. I would just rather see us bring it back at the next council meeting or just do a workshop on it and make sure that it's what it is. I'm not happy with it, so even though I'm in support of food trucks.
Councilman Johnson?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that we're going to probably end up with this kind of conversation if we bring this back a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now. We're going to try to hammer this out and get something that we all, I think President Terhaar said, can be unhappy with. But, I think that there was a lot of work done at our last council meeting, Councilman Bear and I, who probably more than not voted separately, different ways tonight. We came together and along with this council, and we got something I believe is pretty decent. If we added the 200-foot buffer, which I don't like, but I'm willing to compromise. I'm willing to try to get something on the books. And maybe there's no food trucks that will even ever show up. I don't know that. But I'm ready to move forward with this. I'm ready to add the amendment to the ordinance that we have before us. It sounds like to me that might be a good compromise. I think it is. I think from what I'm hearing from some of the audience members, that might give them some satisfaction and some comfort. And if we do this tonight with the amendment to it, that we could have something on the books and move forward. I will say that one of the historic districts that I enjoyed often, much more when I was a young person, was the French Quarter. The French Quarter in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I always remember, I guess that would be considered a historic district.
Yeah.
Would be? I can always remember enjoying a Lucky Dog there after a night of fun, enjoying a Lucky Dog food cart there on Bourbon Street. Many times I'm fortunate enough to go to Manhattan and enjoy food trucks there. So many of the areas, I believe, are in historic districts. I believe we should move forward with this, with the amendment. I don't want this to go by the way of the Hawkshaw property. I don't want this to go the way of the anti-discrimination ordinance. And I believe that if we don't act on this, that this is what will happen. And I want the press to know, and I want everyone out there watching, I've done everything I can possibly do to move this forward. Thank you.
But the reason I share that is if Councilman Johnson ever moved from his beautiful Bayou Terhaar residence and lived on East Zaragoza, he could have a food truck with a generator running in front of that residence. But he might like that noise.
Well, fortunately, you live next to Jackson, so that won't happen.
I really am kind of leaning towards Ms. Cannada-Wynn. I don't want to push it till next council meeting, and I hate being a typical government that just pushes stuff down the road, but I was writing all sorts of stuff while everybody was talking, because I know there's staff input that we have here that our staff, or Mr. Carro gave us, and there's about 6 items that the city staff wants to see put in there, which isn't going to be in there, which I was hoping to get in tonight. I've made about 4 notes of 4 amendments that I'd like to put in there, but it's just, I don't see that getting done tonight. So regardless of really what happens tonight, if it passes or it doesn't pass, with the buffer or without it, I myself plan on at least working on this some more and adding some more stuff, because to me right now, even with the buffer, still has some issues.
I'm in agreement. We have more work to do, but we have the full attention of stakeholders. So I think just the inclusion of the buffer is not enough to pass this.
Councilman Wu?
Yes, Mr. President, I can count, and I'll withdraw my motion.
All right. So we're back to the main motion, which is the ordinance as written. Any further comment from council? Yes.
Yes, Council
Ms.
President.
City Attorney.
Yes, I would like to know, is this going to be the final second reading?
Yes.
Okay. I have looked at the importance of being able to proceed with amendments on second reading. And of course, the law is pretty clear, as is our process that we uniformly follow, to allow amendments on a second reading, as long as the basic substance and purpose of the original ordinance, the proposed ordinance that was passed on first, are not changed. And I don't see that, because we're just amending the first ordinance, but...
Actually, he just pulled his amendment, so we're not amending it at all.
Okay.
Now it's the same exact one that we passed on the first reading.
Okay.
So it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed.
Hasn't changed. Okay, because just to finish the
Go ahead.
thought
I'm
of
sorry.
caution, is that it is a concern that the public has due process and understands what was passed. And so the idea that we were just inserting something somewhere in the ordinance, even though it is an amendment that's not material, it just is something that you guys would have needed to consider. And then also there's a hanging definition. May I mention that to you? And Councilmember Cannada-Wynn stated that the ordinance doesn't address school districts, but if you look in the definition, school districts are mentioned. So are we going to amend that out? It's on...
No, right now, I mean, really the way
So
it is
there's
right
a
now.
definition that doesn't, excuse me for interrupting you,
Sorry.
Council President. So there's a definition that doesn't apply to any section?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean,
And so that's on...
There's primary and secondary schools refers to any school, but then they're not mentioned again in the ordinance anywhere else. So it's kind of a definition that's not needed to be there.
Right, so is it going to be removed?
No.
No.
Councilman Terhaar.
Yes, Mr. Wu.
In light of the discussion, I am going to reintroduce my motion, just so it will be on the table be on record as at least attempting to move it forward.
Second.
Okay. So now, Ms. City Attorney,
Yes.
now there is an amendment to the ordinance.
All right.
I don't think it changes substantially, but I'm not a...
So she state that again, then, please.
Yeah,
Right,
yes, go ahead and
so
state what you were
It
saying.
is appropriate. It is appropriate for amendments to be made to an ordinance on second reading, as long as it doesn't change the initial purpose or character of the ordinance that was passed on first reading, okay? Or proposed on first reading. And this doesn't. It's still food trucks, and I think it is permissible, and we don't want to be in conflict with any charter provision that we might have that's more strict than state law or the Supreme Court holding with regard to what a material change is. But I could not locate any charter provision that would require us to do something different. So it is permissible on second reading to make amendments
Okay.
that don't change the purpose or character of the ordinance.
Okay. You have a question, Dr. Will?
No.
Yes, Councilman Johnson.
Yes, I have a question for the city attorney. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if we've been revived from the dead or not. I'm just still trying to figure that out. But let me ask, if this passes tonight with the 200-foot buffer that the planning board recommended, probably was unanimous, I'm not sure. If this passes tonight with that buffer included, with the school board mentioned, I believe you said was also mentioned in the, forget that. If this passes tonight, will Mr. Terhaar be able to, down the road, bring his ideas forward? Will Ms. Cannada-Wynn be able to bring her ideas forward concerning the school board? We'll be able to amend this again down the road. We'll be able to address their concerns at a later date.
Okay, to answer your question, I need to look at the council rules for reconsideration of an ordinance, and Rusty, if you happen to know what the rule is? Yes.
I don't think he's asking about reconsidering it. I think he's talking about amending an ordinance.
Amending, if this ordinance passes as it is today.
Well, I would call that reconsideration of an ordinance that has already been passed, but if that's permissible, if you pass an ordinance on two readings and then there's no time period, waiting period, to then bring it back to council to amend it, if that doesn't exist within the city's council rules, then it would follow that we could do that.
Can I ask Mr. Wellesby, we had this conversation today. If I could,
sure,
Mr. President, ask the Assistant City Attorney, Mr. Rusty Wells, loved and known by many.
Well, by dogs anyway. I think your question is, if you adopt the reading, this ordinance on second reading tonight,
with the amendment,
and it passes, there's no veto, there's no mayoral veto, there's no override, it goes into the books. It becomes codified, part of your code. Can you at a future time, either next month or next year, come back and change that code section again over time when you find that there are other amendments that you think are appropriate to make it work in a way that you'd like for it to work? The answer is yes, you can't do that.
Right.
Yes.
That's what I thought you were asking.
You won't be amending this ordinance, you'll be amending your code when you
Right.
do that. That's the difference that Ms. Bowling is trying to explain to you.
so if this passes tonight with the amendment, we will have another opportunity to later.
Well, it would be a final reading, and the ordinance would be codified, as Mr. Wells is explaining. But as it sits on the books, a council could then propose changes and amend it, but it becomes codified. It's the final reading of the ordinance.
Right.
So, and I was just asking Mr. Wells if there was a waiting period, but...
She's saying you can't amend this ordinance in the future,
Right,
but you
this
can
is-
amend the code that this creates.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Again, I've got a feeling if this doesn't happen tonight, that this is going to go the way of the human rights ordinance and the Hopjack property. Thank you.
Councilman Bell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a question on the motion to amend, does this, or the 200-foot buffer from the property line, does this include or not include the language about if all the restaurants give permission, the restaurants within that 200-foot?
Dr. Wood?
The only caveat that I would add is the 200-foot. The exception to that is that unless they have permission of the owner. For example, if Seville Square wanted to put out a food truck, if you put the ordinance in without that line, then they would not be unable to put a food truck in front of their own place. So if they see the trucks being very successful, they decide to jump in the water. If they, have the ability or the permission, then they should be allowed, in my opinion, to do so. So that's my intent to have that.
Yes, Councilman Barry.
Then I have a follow-up to that, Mr. President. So, well, what if there's another restaurant within 200 feet? Then you have to get their permission as well. So, there is a very likely possibility that a restaurant will not be able to put a food truck in front of its own restaurant if there's another restaurant within 200 feet. So that's one of the things you have to deal with as well if you vote for this buffer.
Go ahead, Councilman Johnson.
I'll make mine real quick. We will never, and this is addressed to Ms. Cannada-Wynn, we will never have a perfect food truck ordinance. There will always be someone that has a problem with something in it, I promise you. So if we're looking for the perfect food truck ordinance, it will never happen. Thank you.
Okay, so we are voting on the amendment to the ordinance. The buffer, the 200-foot buffer to be added to the ordinance. Permission from all the restaurants within 200 feet. If you can get that, then you can operate in front of them. All right? Anybody know what we're voting on? Please vote. All right, motion fails 4-3. So that brings us back to the original ordinance. Any other discussion on council? You got a card for this? Oh, okay. Ms. Dubasan.
Yes. Since you did not make a change, and it appears that you're going to be stumbling around again with this, we all have a lot of amendment ideas. Since you tried once before a temporary program, why not try this new ordinance as you're considering as your permanent on a temporary basis and pass it for 6 months with an automatic review, and during that time you can look at amendments?
Thank you, Mr. Dubasan. Dr. Wu.
Yes, I was going to respond. Very seldom do I disagree with my fellow councilwoman, Jewel Cannada-Wynn, but a minute ago she mentioned there was a trial period and no one stepped forward. Well, a food truck's going to be an investment of $40,000 to $60,000 to $70,000 to $80,000. Who in heaven's name is going to put that amount of money on something that's going to be for a trial period of 3-4 months and then evaporate? I love, I imagine people like gambling, but you'd have to be crazy to put that kind of money into a food truck just to do it on a trial basis, in my humble opinion. So, although I understand the thrust of it, I would think it would probably be the same as the first go-round. I don't know you'd have anybody step up and do it.
Thank you. So we're going to vote on the ordinance as written. My last comment is, and it's one thing that I've learned on this job very early, is that, it's really easy to take regulations away once they're in place, but it's really hard to put them in after the fact. So that's why I kind of get where Councilman Johnson was driving, that we could pass something tonight and then we'll just change it later, but boy, putting more regulations on top of an ordinance that's already on the books is it's almost impossible. So we're taking them away, people love. So, I think I'd be a little more supportive of this if it was a little bit more regulated, but then we could go in later and take some out if they were not working. So that's my final comment. No more speakers, no more council members. We are voting on the ordinance as written. Please vote. Motion fails 2-5. All right.